Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is time once again for Blitz Boys. Nick and I are here to break down the ACC. We also just had some breaking news before we started recording. Jim Harbaugh is officially going back to the NFL. He's heading to be the head coach of these. I almost called them the San Diego Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers. So we're going to talk all about that, the impact we think it's going to have on Michigan and the Big Ten moving forward. A lot to talk about in this episode, so let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode of Blitz Boys. So, as we just mentioned, Jim Harbaugh off to the NFL. So, let's go ahead and talk about that first. Not really surprising. We had talked about this the past couple weeks. It seemed like a very real possibility. So, I don't think we're surprised by the move. However, just your initial reaction to the news coming out today, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, again, not necessarily shocking, especially over the last, I'd say, probably week or so. The stories were kind of heating up and heating up. That's where he was going to be going.
Hmm.
So again, while not surprising, it is a little bit. I don't know, pick a word that is like surprising, but not exactly surprising. Just because they did just finally win the national championship.
Hmm.
He had spent the last 3 seasons, kind of being at the top of the Big Ten, getting his way to the college football playoff, and obviously this year finally capping it off. So I kind of thought that there was a chance that he came back, but I think in his mind it was he finally proved that he could take on the college level and wants to go back to the NFL and see if he can get a championship there as well. So, as a Penn State fan, part of me kind of likes it. I don't think they're going to fall off, very much. They still got a good team. We'll kind of see here in the next couple days, what happens, how many kids stay, how many kids leave, and whatnot. Um, but I think they're still going to be all right going forward, and I'm interested to see, how things kind of fall in line from here.
Yeah. The initial report I saw yesterday, I haven't seen if this is confirmed or not, but it looks like he's taking Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, with him, which is not surprising. Minter came from the NFL. He was originally with the Ravens. He came over to Michigan, and really took that defense to another level. Um, and so I don't know if that's still happening or not. I haven't seen anything reported on that. Everybody right now is just talking about Harbaugh. So in the grand scheme of things, though, a few weeks ago, I said I didn't believe that McCarthy or Harbaugh would leave. I thought they would both stay. But again, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they left. Well, now I was clearly wrong on both fronts there. Um, and we talked about this the other day in our group chat. McCarthy is being projected as a first round pick, which I find absolutely fucking hilarious. He's not the worst quarterback in the world, and we talked about this before. After the first round of the playoffs, Jim Harbaugh came out and said he's the best quarterback Michigan's ever had. At the college level, obviously Tom Brady is the best at the NFL level, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. Like he's not wrong, but it's so weird to think about that because um, again, he's not a super good quarterback. He's not. Um, he wasn't a guy that went out and won games for them. If anything, he could be a liability at times. But regardless, I mean, they found ways to win, and he has a fantastic record in college. He has a national championship on his finger, um, and now he's off. And Harbaugh is one of the coaches that, like Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll had a weird NFL history before he came back to college, and then he goes back to the NFL and wins the Super Bowl there. Whereas Harbaugh was very established in the NFL, had very good teams, took the 49ers to a Super Bowl, took them to multiple NFC championship games as well. And then things just kind of unraveled underneath of him, and the management above him kind of fell out of favor with him. And that's how he ended up back at Michigan. So he's getting a very talented team in LA and in the Chargers. I know they have a lot of cap issues and everything, so it'll be interesting to see how long it kind of takes them to get back to a top tier level. But we'll wait and see. Um, but as far as Michigan, like you said, I don't see a mass exodus. Everybody on Twitter is already, oh my god, I can't wait to see how many players go in the transfer portal. I don't really see that happening. I'm not saying any Michigan players are going to jump in the portal. I'm sure there's going to be a few, and I'm sure they're going to have some decommits as well. I don't see, this turning into a Washington situation. Absolutely not, where they're only going to have one returning starter. Um, I think that's a very tight knit group, and especially like I said, I think the most logical option for Michigan is to just promote Sharon Moore. He already showed what he can do with 4 games this year. He had that one game. I think he coached week 1, if I'm not wrong. And then obviously the last 3 games of the season, regular season, where he beat Penn State, he beat Ohio State, and I think they're in fantastic hands if the program just gets handed to him. And we talked about this last week as well as we watched all the other pieces kind of move around college football. I don't see a big name out there that Michigan could possibly attract this year. Now next year, and depending what Moore does, we can discuss that then. And it'll be interesting to see again if Minter does leave for the NFL with Harbaugh, who they're going to get for defensive coordinator. But I think looking at what Michigan's defensive roster is, I think that's a very persuasive job for an up and coming DC, or even maybe even like an established DC to be like, hey, come here, you know, continue our success, and then you're in line for a head coaching job or whatever. So like you said, I think Michigan's fine. I don't see a huge exodus coming. A couple of decommits, maybe a couple transfers, but like I said, I saw a bunch of people on Twitter already like, oh my god, can't wait to see who transfers out of Michigan. It's like I don't think we're gonna see any, like, huge names go out, like Donovan Edwards, I don't see him going anywhere, but we shall wait and see. Um, but yeah, so Jim Harbaugh out at Michigan. I say out at Michigan like he got fired. Leaving Michigan, he's gonna head to the LA Chargers and take over, so we will keep an eye on that and see where he goes from here. Let's move in now to our season reviews. We did Group of 5 last week, we're gonna do the ACC this week. The ACC was a very weird conference this year, so we're gonna get into all of that. First, we're gonna start with obviously right now there's a huge legal battle going on just down the road from me in Charlotte between the ACC and Florida State. Florida State is suing to get out of their grant of rights, so that way they can leave the conference. The ACC is reverse suing them to for breach of contract and a bunch of other things to essentially keep them there and make Florida State even pay a little bit more money than they want to. Um, so Nick, I know you really wanted to talk about this last week when we started talking about some things. First question I have for you is: do you see the ACC either a getting suing their way out, or do you think it's going to come down to if they really want out that bad, they're going to have to pony up the 500 plus $1 million?
Yeah. So I'd actually, it's funny that you asked that the way that you did because I had some stuff typed in my notes and I ended up taking it out because I didn't want it to be taken the wrong way or whatnot. Um, but basically, yeah. Long story short, it's gonna come down to how bad they want. Do they genuinely want out, or was this a bluff? To try to grasp more attention that they weren't already getting, bitching about getting um, left out of the college football playoffs and whatnot. It's hard to tell. Like you said, they're going to have to shell out a lot of money if they want to get out, and on top of what I'm sure they're already shelling out,
Mhm.
or is scheduled to be shelled out for you know all these legal battles going on. Um, so we're gonna find out here, not necessarily soon, but it'll feel like soon. And honestly, I think that there is a chance that they do genuinely want out. But for reasons that we'll talk about here in a second, I think I'm leaning more towards their staying.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see them legally getting out of this because again, it seemed like the ACC kind of knew this was coming. I know there was a bunch of rumblings about it before the season. That seemed to die down once football started, and then once the season ended, when Florida State announced that they were going to be suing to get out of their grant of rights, the ACC almost instantly is like, okay, well, here's our countersuit, and it was basically prepared. And again, from what everybody else has said and everybody else's reaction to this is the grant of rights is essentially iron tight or ironclad, and it's going to be extremely difficult to get out of this, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get out of it. Even if they say they sue their way out of it, again, you have to pay all these legal fees and so on and so forth. Um, and so I don't think legally they can get out of it. I think they are going to have to pony up this 500 plus $1 million. Um, but the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is I mean, to me, outside of and the whole issue that a lot of other ACC teams with this, as well as Florida State have with the grant of rights, is the fact that we're now seeing the Big Ten and even the Big 12 is starting to outpace the ACC in money. And the SEC are signing these ungodly contracts. The ACC can't change their contract for years. They are locked into, I believe it's 2036. I might be wrong, but I believe it is 2036 that they are locked into these contracts. Um, and ESPN is not going to sit there and renegotiate their contract and give them more money because they're getting it at such a discount compared to these other things now. And that's why these teams would like to get out of the grant of rights, is because they want to go make more money somewhere else, or get a new contract for the ACC and get paid a lot more money. Um, but outside of the money factor, the move itself for me doesn't make sense for Florida State, and this got kicked into high gear because obviously they got left out of the playoffs and so on and so forth, and I understand being upset about that, but with the way that college football is moving, we're heading to a 12-team playoff next year, where if you win the ACC championship, you are guaranteed a slot, almost a bye essentially, in the first round of the playoffs. You were heading to the playoffs regardless. Um, and even then, if you finish second, let's say it's them and Clemson next year, it comes down to the wire. I can see both teams as long as they're inside the top 15, getting in. And so leaving just because you got spurned out of the playoffs this year, and I mean, in my eyes, they're primed to be one of the best teams in the ACC for years and years to come. I think we're looking at the next Clemson. We saw Clemson go to multiple playoffs, multiple national championships for years there. I think we're starting to see the birth of that for Florida State. And from again, outside of just a money perspective, um, I don't see it making sense because if you're going to go to the SEC or the Big Ten, or I don't even know where you would go at this point, or who would want to take on Florida State, but you're making your life much, much harder. Um, eh, so to me, that aspect of it doesn't really make sense. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So I had two ways of looking at this. So the first way is, kind of what we've seen a lot of the Pac-12 teams do. I mean, pretty much any team, or not any team, but most teams that change conferences. Um, your first choice is to obviously go to one of the best conferences, to put yourself within the middle of the best competition in the country. And obviously, yeah, for the first year, two, three, whatever,
Mhm.
might sting a little bit, but eventually you're gonna learn it, and you're gonna be able to build and make yourself competitive in it. But obviously, one of those or the two conferences that come to mind are the Big Ten or the SEC. And while if I'm Florida State and I'm choosing between those two, I probably go Big Ten just because I feel like they're built slightly better for the Big Ten than they are the SEC. I don't think it's favorable for them to go to either, but for the sake of the argument, um, and the second way to look at it is, where can I go and have the most success? You were at the top of the ACC this past season. You have a good chance of being at the top, next season, like you said, seasons to come, or at least competing to be at the top. So if you're leaving the ACC, the Pac-12 is no longer a thing. If you want your best chance of success, that would be the Big 12. And I think that out of all the conferences they could go to, the Big 12 does make the most sense out of all of them. Because again, comparing how they're built and how the other teams in those conferences are built, I think they match up the best with the Big 12. Um, but with that being said, I mean, they have it made in the ACC right now. And I don't mean to make the ACC sound like a bunch of slouches or nothing, but as of right now, it is the easiest conference in college football, as far as Power Five goes, or Power Four, I guess you could call it. Um, but they just won the conference championship. They had a chance come decision day to make the college football playoffs. Um, we won't get into that conversation. We beat that horse enough. Um, but yeah, they just won the ACC. The ACC is their best chance to continue to win conference championships, and especially going to the 12-team playoff. Your best chance of making the playoff is winning your conference, or at the very least placing second. And I don't see that happening. While FSU is a very good team, I don't see that happening very easily, in the Big Ten or the SEC. You think about the Big Ten. We sat down the one night and looked at, who our respective teams we're going to be playing and what their schedules look like. And I tell you, as a Penn State fan who's can say we've really only had two hard games a year, maybe three, depending on what kind of year Iowa was having. Um, with Oregon, Washington, that schedule looks a whole lot different. And
Mhm,
if I'm Florida State, while they had a lot of tough competition on their schedule last season, I again it was ACC play, and I think that when it comes, you know, you compare them side by side, I'd take ACC schedule over a Big Ten schedule any day, and that's not even mentioning the SEC. Um, so again, I think if you get out, if I'm Florida State, I'm probably looking at the Big 12. But again, you have it made right now. You're built to have success over the next few years. I wouldn't ruin it.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so yeah, again, from a financial standpoint, I understand it. One thing, all of this, and to me, this is very clear back in the fall when everything started to kind of unfold. Um, I believe we're just going to watch the slow, painful death of the ACC over the remainder of this contract. I think once that contract is up, um, I'm sure. So I believe it was called the Magnificent Seven. Those were the seven schools trying to get out of the grant of rights. They wanted to leave. There's going to be schools remaining, but it's not going to be the same ACC that we just watched. Duke, North Carolina are two of those teams, and those are two teams that want to stay tied to each other, especially for basketball. Florida State, obviously Clemson as well. I think NC State was in there. I can't remember if it was I believe Georgia Tech might have been in there as well. I can't remember who the 17 was. Or regardless, you're going to lose probably seven of your biggest names in the conference once this grant of rights is up and these teams can finally be free. Um, and I don't see a way that the ACC can salvage its image or its where it's elevated to right now. We look at the ACC and we're like, it's not the strongest conference, especially from terms of play and stuff, but it is still a premier conference. It's still a top four conference, like we just said, a power four conference. It might as well be a bottom tier group of five once those top tier teams leave. So, I think again we're just going to witness a slow death of the ACC for the next couple of years. Which again,
It feels
the
weird
same
saying
way,
Power Four though, doesn't it?
yeah, it does.
I could
But
tell by the study it felt weird.
yeah, no, but I mean, just whereas it was a very quick death for the Pac-12, and that was still sad. It's going to be probably even sadder to watch this just get dragged out for so long, unless something drastic changes between now and then. I don't think we're going to have the ACC around in 12 years. I wanna say it's 2036, but I'm probably wrong on that. I know it's 2030 something, which is an ungodly number to think about considering we just started 2024. Let's get into the rest of the group of 4 or group of 4. Let's get into the rest of the ACC, and finish a review of the whole conference. So kinda same thing we did with all the other conferences last week. We're gonna talk about a surprising team, a disappointing team, our favorite game from the year, a team we're looking forward to next year, not necessarily have to be the best, just an interesting team going into the offseason and next season as well. And then our way too early championship prediction. So first up, give me your most surprising team from the ACC this year.
Yeah, so for most surprising, I went with Louisville, and I didn't choose them necessarily because I expected them to have a bad season. But I didn't have them making the conference championship game, let alone competing and having a chance to win at the end of the game. I mean, it was a 10-point game, and I believe three or four of those points that was gained by Florida State was in the fourth quarter. So again, didn't expect to be there. They put together a hell of a season. Almost, they were so close to capping it off with the conference championship. I mean, they were in. If they won the conference championship, there was conversation depending on how things went about possible college football playoffs. So good season, especially for me not having them up that high in the conference. They have plenty of room to get better and compete. So they were definitely my most surprising team.
Yeah, I mean, just the one thing, because I wrote 2 down just in case, because I wasn't sure who was gonna take
Always,
what. Yeah,
yeah.
um, but with Louisville, and before the season, I mean, the coming into the year, it was, "Okay, it's gonna be Florida State and Clemson." That we guarantee that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna be playing in Charlotte at the end of the year. Who's gonna be that 3rd team? And everybody was looking at UNC or even NC State. I had thrown out the name Duke, and I will go back and pull up the clip if I need to. Nobody was talking about Louisville though. I mean, nobody was really looking at Louisville. They were having an incoming coach. Um, obviously, a lot of turnover there and just uncertainty. And like you said, they came through and they looked very good throughout the most of the season. Unfortunately, stumbled late and lost back 3 games in a row with the bowl game. Um, for my most surprising team, I'm going to go with Virginia Tech and also Georgia Tech. Both Tech schools because again, coming into the season, nobody thought very highly of them. Nobody picked them to even make bowl games. We talked about Virginia Tech a couple weeks into the season. Slade was very down on them, called for Brent Pry to be fired. And obviously they had a very ugly start. Both
Took that
teams
personally.
yeah, both teams were able to turn that around and perform very well for the rest of the season. Both make a bowl game, both win their bowl games, and it was just very surprising to me to see both teams come on so strong, especially in the second half of the season. I mean, you think for Georgia Tech, you think back again, they played Georgia very tight. A lot of people forget about that game because it got kind of overshadowed by Alabama and Auburn, and obviously that could have been a huge upset for Alabama. Um, and then what they went on to do is beating Georgia, going to the playoffs, but Georgia was in a dogfight, no pun intended, with, Georgia Tech. Also, rest in peace, Uga, and
Yeah,
fuck
facts.
Texas. I don't know if you saw what Barstool Texas tweeted, um,
Mhm.
but, so they tweeted the video from the 2019 Sugar Bowl. I can't remember if it was played in 2019 or played in 2020, but when they played Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, before the game, Bevo, like, ran through his barricade and it was ran over Uga. And they
Mm.
tweeted like I forget what the exact wording was because they deleted the tweet now. But they were basically like, "Oh yeah, never forget," and like everybody's like, "Are you fucking serious?" And then Oklahoma State was like, "You gave a shit for killing a you know a Longhorn before our conference championship game, but you're gonna tweet shit like this." And I was just like, "Oh
Right.
my
Yeah.
god."
A beloved dog.
Typical.
Like, love or hate Georgia. I never met anybody that didn't like Uga. So
Yeah, like I fucking hate Washington, but I'm not gonna talk shit on a husky dog. First of all, I love huskies more than anything, but like
facts.
that's just there's shit you don't do, and you don't talk
Yeah.
about the animals. Like,
Right.
I mean, imagine somebody talking shit about LSU and be like, "Yeah, that fucking tiger's stupid too." Like,
Tiger.
first of all, you're talking about an animal that would viciously kill you.
Yeah. He's got
Nobody's
nothing
talking
to
shit.
do with this.
Yeah, nobody's talking shit about Mike though. But I mean, just for you to think it's okay to talk shit about Uga is disgusting. But anyway, I forget where I was going with this, but oh, I was talking about Georgia Tech.
Mm.
Um, but and then you think back to the Miami game too. Again, they should have lost that game. And then Miami does the stupidest Mario Cristobal, and they turn around and they have a Hail Mary and they win that game. So uh, very interesting kind of tracks they got on to get to that point. And they both had very good seasons where I don't think a lot of people expected them to do that. Again, Slade's calling for one of the coaches to get fired just a few weeks in. On the flip side of that coin, your most disappointing team. I feel like we're both gonna have the same one. I wrote one down for this, but
Yeah. I'm nervous because I have a feeling we're gonna see. Hard to tell. So I did think about Clemson here, but I ended up going with UNC.
mm,
Um,
okay.
yeah. Uh,
Well, Syracuse.
you know. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Syracuse was up there, but like I didn't have a lot of hopes. So there was a lot of people like you said. It was kind of Clemson and Florida State conference to lose.
Hmm.
And a lot of people threw UNC into that mix. Um, you know, some people had them making the conference championship game. Some people had them winning it. Um, but whether it was me or other people, those predictions were way off. From preseason ACC championship hopefuls and starting the season 6-0 to ending the season in the bottom half of the conference barely. They were the top team in the bottom half, but still bottom half. And going 2-5 in their last 2 and 5. There we go. I said it right the first time. In their last seven, uh, there's very few teams in the country that had a more disappointing season than UNC, in my opinion. So this one was pretty.
Yeah. For me, like I said, it's Syracuse. And not because I had high expectations for them coming into the season. It's more so how their season finished. This is back to back years now where they had a very hot start to the season. They had a very experienced roster this year. They had a lot of depth, and then they last year they played Clemson on the road. I think they were 6-0 at that point, or 5-0, and then they ended up finishing the season 1-6. This year they were 4-0, and they finished the season 2-4, including that Clemson game. So just back to back years where and obviously they've fired their coach, they've moved on, but you had a carbon copy of the season, and you knew what you did wrong in this year and kind of where everything fell apart, and then you go into this season and you do the exact same shit. And they got blown out by Clemson, and at that point in the season, Clemson was nothing special. Obviously, Syracuse, they had played almost nobody up to that point, much like the year before, but still, to kind of get dismantled like that by Clemson 2 years in a row. I shouldn't say the year before because it was a miracle comeback by Clemson, um, but regardless, what I'm saying is to basically have the same exact season 2 years in a row, where again you have this fantastic start, you have a very experienced team, and you just crumble like this. It was disheartening to see and disappointing. Your best game from the ACC this year.
Yeah, so there were a lot of good ones to choose from here in the ACC. But the game that I went with was Florida State at Clemson. It was a game that went to overtime. Um, in the grand scheme of things, Florida State kept their ACC championship and playoff hopes alive. I, I guess more playoff than ACC championship because Clemson was a little ways down there, but nonetheless kept that alive. And sorry, I couldn't read my own notes. One of my glasses on here. Yeah, kept their players' hopes alive in Death Valley, which is difficult enough, and then with the pressure that comes along with it. And at the time that this game happened, um, Florida State was talked about in the college football playoff conversations, but like this was still relatively early on in the season. Um, so this was really it could have been a huge turning point for Florida State season. Part of
Mhm.
me wishes they would have lost this game, so we would have never had to hear Florida State fans bitch for 2 weeks about not making the playoffs. But nonetheless, and to make it even worse, on paper, this is a game that Clemson should have won. They had the advantage in a lot of statistical categories, from
Mhm.
yards, first downs, all that stuff. They didn't have the advantage where it mattered most. And this is one reason we enjoy watching ACC football or college football in general, because this stuff can happen any given weekend. But this was a game that I don't think many people realized at the time, but had a Florida State loss could have had huge implications for the rest of the season in the ACC.
Yeah, absolutely. My game of the year I gave to Duke versus UNC. This game went to double overtime. Just looking at the fourth quarter. So, first play of the first, or excuse me, second play of the fourth quarter. UNC scores. They go up 26-14. Um, from there, back to back touchdowns for Duke. It's 29-26 with just over 5 minutes left. Then, with just under 2 minutes left, UNC scores. They take the lead 33-29. Duke scores with 41 seconds left. They take the lead 36-33. And then UNC kicks the game tying field goal as time expires. They head to overtime, both kick field goals, double overtime. UNC scores. They get the 2 point conversion. Duke scores. They don't get the 2 point conversion. I remember watching this game. Forget who Oregon played this night, but I think they played Arizona State. Might be wrong on that, but they played, in the afternoon. I watched that game, and I was like, "I might head to bed." And then I was like, "Well, Duke UNC's on. Let me check it out and watch it." And I was just like, "Holy shit, like, this game is never gonna end." It really felt like one of those games. I would remember texting you guys about it. This was just a wild game, and this might make our we're gonna do a top 25 games of the year. I think we have to discuss putting this one on there. Next thing I wanna talk about is give me a team that you're keeping an eye on this offseason. Again, they might not be very good next year. They might be horrible. They might not whatever. Just something that's catching your eye, something that you wanna keep an eye on, throughout the offseason heading into the 2024 season.
Yeah, I could have put multiple teams here. Georgia Tech would be an honorable mention, but I ended up going with Virginia Tech.
God damn
Um,
it.
I thought we were gonna make it the whole way through. I thought. Well, I mean, technically we did have the one earlier, but you did write two down. A team that finally seems to have found some footing. They've struggled the past couple years. We thought last year was going to be another ride on the struggle bus, like you said earlier. They turned it around, made a bowl game. Um, they seem to be heading in the right direction. Is what I'm getting at, and it's intriguing to think about where this team could go. in a conference that right now, especially with a Florida State future pending
Mhm.
legal ramifications and whatnot. The conference itself very unstable, full of question marks. If Virginia Tech can kind of do what they seem to have done the past couple years into last year and just keep looking forward, keep their head down, and keep working, this is a team that you know in next year when we're doing these reviews could be talking about most surprising or how they ended up making their way in the conference championship game or whatnot. So definitely the number one team in the ACC. I'm keeping my eye on.
Yeah, and the reason I put them down is because, like you said, they have really Brent Pry has really kind of turned this program around, and he has them heading in the absolute right direction. I know the one big thing I read during the season that he is really invested into is I can't think of the coach. I want to say Fuente. That might be wrong. Anyway, the previous head coach kind of burned a lot of bridges with local high school coaches and recruiting and stuff, and he has really invested himself into repairing those relationships and reconnecting those ties. And I think Brent Pry is the right guy for this job. Again, this is a team that somehow found themselves, on the outside looking in, but still with an outside shot at making the ACC championship game late into the season, which was just absolutely ridiculous to hear. Um, where it gets more interesting for me to keep my eye on them going forward, and it's not just because I'm wearing the shirt, um, is
Are sure?
while they have built up all this momentum, um, they don't have a great recruiting class coming in. They're number 10 in the conference out of 17 teams. They're number 14 in the transfer portal class. And I'm not saying that they need to change a whole bunch or bring in any high caliber players, but it's always curious to see teams on the right track struggling, with the recruiting. And again, like I said, Coach Pry is obviously trying to rebuild a lot of those relationships with local coaches, but still, at this level of college football, it's a national recruiting search. Um, and so they're also losing 4 defensive starters. They did have the number 20 total defense in the country. They're losing 3 out of the top 4 wide receivers. So again, they do have a lot of pieces to kind of replace and fix. Um, One thing I am very excited about is their quarterback coming back next year, Drones. He's only a sophomore. He had 2,000 yards. He didn't start, I want to say, week 4. All the other quarterbacks got hurt. They threw him in, and I remember a lot of the media was talking about, well, this is why their season's done because there's no way this sophomore is going to come in and be able to perform at a high level. 2,000 yards passing, 17 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and he's also runs like a maniac. They have a great quarterback. But again, it'll be interesting to see if they can replace these receivers, if they can replace those defensive starters, and that's just at least 4 defensive starters. I just went through the top 10 defensive players. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how they replace those pieces, and if they can continue this momentum. But it would be awesome to see Virginia Tech climb back towards the top of college football. They're not a blue blood, but I don't know what you would classify them, but just a gritty team that you always enjoy seeing be successful because I feel like it elevates college football as a whole. Like I said, that was one of my favorite environments I've ever been in for college football, and I think when you get more eyes on that, it makes the experience of college football as a whole better. So it'll be interesting to see if Pry can continue to build that up. Last but not least, your way too early conference championship prediction for 2024.
So I kept Florida State out of this for two reasons mainly. One, because we don't know what their future holds at this moment in time, and two, because I don't. I just with the way things went down this year and the way everybody just kind of bailed out. When things got hard and they got left out of the college football playoffs, and they had a chance to fight for themselves and go up against Georgia, who also felt like they should have been in the college football playoffs, and they just kind of bailed. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't have a lot of respect for Florida State right now, although I do understand that they're set up very well to be a good football team going forward. So outside of them, I went with Louisville. I mentioned it earlier, 10 points away from ACC championship, which I know a lot of people will probably sit there, hear that, and think, oh, 10 points is 10 points, a loss is a loss, whatever. Um, Watching that game, it felt closer than 10 points. Things just didn't happen to go the way they needed them to go. But when I look at the other teams at the top of the ACC, even Florida State included in that, Louisville feels like the safest pick at this point in time. Again, because we don't know what Florida State holds. Um, Clemson, UNC, Duke has a lot of turnover between coach, quarterback, all that. Um, UNC obviously losing their quarterback, and Clemson. I don't even know what's going on in Clemson right now. Um, so I feel like Louisville is the safe pick here, especially for the way too early. When we get to the preseason, I might look into it a little more and maybe make a better pick. But as of right now, I feel comfortable saying Louisville.
Yeah. I mean, for that same reason, just because we don't know what's going to happen between now and the start of the season, I'm going to keep Florida State. I think Mike Norvell is a fantastic head coach. We've obviously seen what he can do this season. And a lot of people forget coming into last year, people didn't understand why he was still there. They thought for sure he was going to get fired, especially with Dion's contract coming up at or Jackson State. Slade's got me fucked up. He's got me saying it backwards now. But everybody, well, he's going to return home. He's going to go back to Florida State and take them back to the top. And Norvell just has an amazing season out of nowhere, and then he continued it this year. They go undefeated until they lose in the Orange Bowl. Yeah, the Orange Bowl. I had to double check my brain. But they're also bringing in the number 11 national recruiting class and the number 3 transfer portal class. So, like you said, it was very disheartening to see a lot of those players quit and kind of move on. But they're also reloading. I also have a lot of faith in Mike Norvell as a coach. And like you said, there's a ton of question marks around a lot of these other teams in the ACC. And so I think Florida State has a very good chance at repeating as our ACC champion in 2024. That'll do it for this week's episode of Blitz Boys. Nice, short, and sweet. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, Slade is here. It took until 5 minutes before we recorded for me to realize that he wasn't joining us because my phone just decided to not accept text messages from him. Um, Nonetheless, hopefully all three of us are back next week, but we'll be breaking down the Big Ten first. And so that's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Obviously, a conference that we care very deeply about, especially more so heading into next year. So hopefully, you guys join us for that. We'll be talking about some other things going on around the world of college football as well. If any other coaching news breaks out, we'll be here to talk about it. But thank you guys so much for checking us out. Also, before I let you go, don't forget to check out our current video series we're doing, and we'll be doing more throughout the off season as well. Right now, we're using NCAA 14 revamped to figure out what it would look like if the College Football Playoff Committee used the FCS playoff format to determine the national champion. We have posted the first two parts. Part three will be out this weekend. That's going to be the championship game. We're not going to spoil it for you here. So you guys need to go over there and check it out. It's been a lot of fun to put that together. We're going to have a lot of fun getting part three ready for you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you want to see any other content from us, make sure you drop a comment on any of our videos. Tell us what you want to see. We love to answer to the people. I'll stop rambling now. I'll get out of your guys' hair. You have a great rest of your day, and we will see you guys in the next video.